Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of Visibility Era, the podcast. I'm here today with Danielle. Welcome, Danielle, to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
I loved how we met in a Slack channel, as one does in
Yes.
2024. And we had a great phone call, and we just talked about natural birth before we even started this episode. So
Yeah.
we have lots to talk about, business and beyond. But I was really excited to have you on the show. One of the things that you do really, really well with product companies and product brands is help them go to market. And for a lot of our audience, that might be something that is new to them or something that they're maybe thinking about down the pipeline. Maybe they want to launch their own product company and product brand. So I'd love for you to take us back. I know you have a long experience in history with CPG and retail companies. So tell us a little bit more about your background today.
Yes. Yes. So I've been in the industry for about 16 years or so, and specifically in CPG food and beverage. I started off in cold pressed juice. I was a founder in my earlier days. I had my own cold pressed juice company.
I
This was
didn't know that.
before. Yeah. A lot of people don't know this about me, but this was before Press Juicery. This was before Blueprint Cleanse. Like, people didn't really know like what cleanses were. We got a write up in Daily Candy. I don't know if you ever like knew about that publication, but you might be a little bit too young. But Daily Candy was like the go-to email, where it was like the daily email that went out, and whatever Daily Candy said to do, you did it. And it was yeah, it was, we got a write-up, like a PR agency put us, Azioni PR actually put us in there, and I kid you not, our phone didn't stop ringing for almost 2 years. So it was just like a constant stream of cleanses. People wanted to We were selling 5-day juice cleanses, 3-day juice cleanses, 7, 14 days. So people were like really getting into this whole like cold pressed juice cleanse thing. I got an opportunity to merge my clients over to another cold pressed juice company that was just getting going. I got approached by two founders who were in fashion, who were launching this brand, and they had a lot of backing behind them and needed somebody who knew about cold pressed juice. So I merged my company with them and helped them get their brand off the ground. It's called Juice Served Here. I was with them from day one to the last day. And we fully commercialized the brand, took it from a raw, cold pressed glass, bottled in glass product to a fully commercialized HPP, nationally distributed product over the course of about 6, 7 years. From there, I went on and launched my own kids plant based snack company that Kraft Heinz invested in. That being with Kraft Heinz was like a huge time in my life. I learned so much. Really, I was pretty weak on the finance side at that point in my career. And they really took me to school on just how big CPG operates. And I'd never been exposed to that. So I would say that that's where I like got my master's in business or CPG, honestly. Um, Unfortunately, this is a story for another time, but my partner and I were not a good match. We split. I went back to beverage. From there, I went on and helped start up De La Calle Tepache, who I'm
Love
sure
that
some of
company.
our listeners may know. I was the president of that company, and I built it from, zero to when I left 3.5 years later or so. Really awesome, incredible experience. I still love the team there. They're like family to me, honestly. I got recruited to go and temporarily CEO a legacy bakery company called Sweet Lady Jane here in Los Angeles that has been around for 35 years. I was really happy at De La Calle, but it's not every day that you get an opportunity like that to turn around a 35-year-old bakery brand. So I took it. It was a very interesting experience. Like, gosh, I think honestly, that's like another podcast episode. That's like a whole podcast episode in itself. Um, but ultimately the owners decided to sell the company, which was definitely the right move. I helped them get everything set up for that. And then I moved on to Farm Shop. And sorry, we sold the company and then I moved on to Farm Shop. And during my time at Farm Shop, I helped commercialize about, they brought me on because they wanted to get into CPG and commercialize some of their products. I commercialized about, 65 items for them. I had been wanting for, many years to go off on my own and start my own agency. And finally, after doing that for about a year, I had been putting together, my services and figuring out exactly my like unique point of view. And recently I just launched It's All Happening, which is our tagline is CPG experts that solve, staff, and accelerate. So we really like to work with our, ideal customer is the brand that's just getting going. So the early stage brand that maybe still in like the validation phase, or they may have a product and they just need help getting it off the ground, building a go to market strategy, building a distribution and a supply chain strategy, et cetera, marketing. So yeah, we love to come in at like the super early stages and help lay the foundation and the framework so they can set their company up for success, and attract those repeat customers, buyers, and investors. So that's what I like to focus on. That's sort of like my framework for the agency is building a brand that's going to attract, consumers not just for that first purchase, but we want them to continually buy. We need to appeal to buyers if we're going retail, very important. And then also we need to appeal to investors. Our business has to be structured in a way that is going to be appealing for people to write checks because in CPG, it's an inventory business. So you do need capital, you do need funds. Um, so yeah, and then over the years, I've worked with other brands. I've consulted with many brands, um, on the side, et cetera. But yeah, the agency was just recently birthed.
So cool. There's so many different things I want to ask about and start with. One of the things I'd love to know about is, so you said that you love to help these kind of early stage brands. So I'm thinking like, are these the brands who have just gone to the farmer's market and they're making their products in their house, like where they got the cottage license, or are they a little bit further past that initial stage? Like, what are the kind of stepping stones for a CPG brand from ideation to bringing it out into the world?
Yeah, yeah, good question. So, yeah, oftentimes some people they choose to test out in the farmer's market. I think that's like a great way to validate your product. But that's not the only way, right? Some people validate their product just by doing market research, and talking to buyers, which I think is also a smart way to do it. Like, you don't have to actually sell your product to quote unquote validate it. Um, some people like already have a customer and already have an idea for a product. But regardless, we like to get involved. Not saying we won't get involved if you're already launched, but we can really be the most helpful when you're building that foundation.
Yeah, that
So
makes sense.
yeah. So I have, for example, like on my client roster right now, I have brands who are already in market and trying to launch in other markets. Like,
Mm,
I have a brand who's launching a product, like in the middle of launching a product line extension. She was just a D2C brand before, and now she wants to expand in retail. So we're helping with the go to market strategy. I have someone who is like literally just like waiting for their first batch of inventory to arrive before we can start selling and launching the product. I have another early stage RTD non-alc brand that is she's just putting the formulations together. So we're sourcing co-manufacturers and cans, etc. So varying stages, but like early stage is the name of the game for sure.
yeah, and you mentioned that it's so important to have funding when you were thinking of launching any product like this. So, what are those first initial steps or stages? Who do you contact? Should you be putting together a pitch deck? What does that process look like for that small business owner who's like, I have a cool idea. How do I get some money behind me?
Yeah, yeah, I've seen this done so many different ways. I like to start with a small amount of money at the beginning to just get like the basics in play. And when I say the basics, I mean, yes, investor deck. Number one. Number two, you're going to need a sales deck because I really, really encourage people to talk to not only investors, but buyers when you're first
Mm,
getting going. Even before you've purchased your inventory and, like warehouse your inventory, if you can talk to buyers, and I actually have a bunch of Instagram content that I'm about to drop about this because it's like, it's so crucial. Like, so many people just create a product because they think that they've got this like brilliant idea, which oftentimes they do, right? Like we're intuitive people, like we know we're creating products for ourselves. Oftentimes we're like, what, there's a need for this, and why doesn't this exist? And why doesn't that exist? But like, have you validated it with a with buyers or customers? So if you're going to go
mm.
D2C, you need to validate it with like a group of people. If you're going to go retail, you really need to talk to buyers and make sure that they're interested. If you don't have access to like Target buyers or Whole Food buyers, or like talk to your local grocery store buyers, like they will give you feedback on if they're interested in this product or not. So, I guess to answer your question about like what are the first steps, I like to start with a small amount of money to get your basics together, to get your go-to-market strategy together, to get your decks together, investor and sales. You're going to need a brand, right? You're going to need brand guidelines. You're going to need packaging mock-ups, voice and tone, your fonts, like all the necessary brand elements that it takes to launch, and get this like nice package together, with a small amount of money. Maybe you can fund it yourself, or maybe you bring it in from friends or family. I wouldn't you I wouldn't like go to people that you don't know for that small amount of money. Um, then from there, you start having conversations because you've got something, right? You're like, "Hey, look at this." Sure, they're mock-ups, but look at this product line, and these are our unique value propositions, and this is how we're going to roll it out, and et cetera. If you have that to start having conversations with, people will take you seriously, right? Oh, they've thought about this. They've really mapped out how they're going to take this product to market. And then things will start to progress from there. Then, once you feel validated, you feel confident that either customers or buyers are going to buy your product, then build your inventory. Okay. Then you invest in your inventory and go small at first, but like, bring some inventory into your warehouse, set up your distribution, and then you start shipping it. Then you can raise more money.
This is really, really good. Even like the reminder of buyers and also consumers and talking to them, having those conversations. And even your reminder of, hey, if you don't know someone who's a Target or Whole Foods buyer, you could still go to your local grocery store and have a conversation. I think that's where people could get tripped up in their mind. It's like there's always a way to bring it to our level. Because sometimes I think it's easy to think, okay, well, Whole Foods isn't going to talk to me yet for whatever, reason that might be in someone's mind. So I like how you could break it down. And then on the consumer end, they could be talking to friends and family. Hey, what do you think about this? Would you buy this? What am I missing? What am I not seeing? And I love that this is the first necessary step because you're right. As the founder who has the idea, we think it's the bee's knees. Of course we do, because
Yeah.
we're like, this is incredible. Like, I came up with this in my, morning meditation, or I was walking the dog and the idea came to me. But we do really need that stage of iterating the idea and making sure it's going to land with the right people.
Well, and to your point about the farmer's market, I want to take it back to that. Like that also could be your validation. Like so say you're in the farmer's market and you're selling, and you have like a weekly stand, or you have like multiple stands going in different locations weekly or whatnot, and you're consistently getting those repeat purchases, and you see those same people coming back week over week to buy your product, and then you're acquiring new people along the way too. Like that's also a great way to validate your product. So to my point, like validation can be done in a number of different ways. It all depends on what your channels are, you know, like what you aspire to with your sales channels.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense. So one other thing that you mentioned as you started sharing was starting to think of investors and funding, but maybe not going to the people that you don't know yet. Because again, it's like I think you're doing a really good job at reminding us that we can start where we're at and we don't need to be so far away yet. So kind of building those stepping stones to arrive there and get there. And I have a friend who has a software company, so very different model, but he got a lot of funding for his company. And then he felt at the whim of what they wanted instead of like his own direction. So I think in the beginning too, so good to have be able to maintain a little bit of that autonomy and that control, because when you do bring investors in, those are some different conversations.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And you know, when you're, you know, using other people's money, there's like a certain level of expectation, right? So it's just nice to have a solid foundation and have a you know, a product that you feel very strongly has been validated and is going to work. You know, you have a solid brand foundation, and then you can start talking to angels who, you know, maybe you don't know. And maybe that still includes friends and family as well too. But you just sort of like broaden your circle a little bit after that first round of just like super, super early small seed money, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah. You've had a lot of really cool experiences over the years. I did not know about the Tepache, which a big fan of, so we love that. That was
Oh
so
yes.
fun to find out about. I think we have some in our basement right now. So
Really? I love
yeah,
that.
I love that
Yeah,
brand. I think we first
it's
found
a
it
great
in
brand.
Austin. We were there for a trip, and then now I'm seeing it like all the Whole Foods on the East Coast as well. So, bing bing,
Yeah,
awesome job.
yes.
I'd love to hear, like, from your experience, what are some of the expensive mistakes that some of these brands are making when they're taking these first initial steps toward the go-to-market strategy?
Yeah. Um, okay, so the biggest one that I have seen is brands often start out and it all depends also like who your investors are. So oftentimes if you're starting off with more professional money, meaning you have a private equity group or a venture capitalist group on your cap table earlier on, there can be more of a pressure for top line revenue growth, and now these days profitability is very, very important in our industry. So I've seen I've seen this before where investors are really pushing top line growth because they want you to be their next unicorn within their portfolio. And what happens is that you start chasing top line growth outside of your quote unquote territory. And it turns into this um, difficult situation where you don't have the support and the financial funds and the support to be able to prop up this
Mhm.
new distribution. Um, so, you know, expansion before the distribution expansion before like the true foundational brand awareness is there. So, I like to really focus on narrow and deep, narrow and deep, narrow and deep. Um, and what narrow and deep means is you take a small geography and you really hone in and focus on that geography until you are 1000% sure that this geography is like fully saturated. They understand your brand, they know who you are, they're purchasing over and over again. Like stay there until you've checked those boxes and then expand. So oftentimes what people do is they say, okay, we're going to go narrow and deep. We start narrow and deep, but then, you know, a month later, they get, you know, they're a hot brand because it's new, and you know, maybe like they're offering some type of like unique value proposition. And they get a retailer from, I'm just making this up, from Texas, for example. Hey, we're a 10-door chain over here. We love your product. What do you think? But wait, we were supposed to be focusing on California over
Mm,
here, on Southern California, because that's all our resources can really take. But wait, this retailer is amazing over here. We think our ideal customer lives there. So you're kind of stuck between a rock and a hard place. And I think that you have to say no in the early stages to a lot of things. And I think that's where brands get in trouble is when they don't say no and they say yes to too many things. Um, I received some like amazing advice a couple of years ago that's like so simple and so obvious. And like it just like really rung true to me. And the advice was only do 2 to 3 things at one time.
mm,
Like 2 to 3 things, like that's all you should do at once. And it's just like, yeah, 2 to 3 things. Like it's so simple and like the most basic advice, but it's like I really should have implemented that a lot earlier on in my career, because you can get overwhelmed and quite frankly, spend too much money too quickly. It's so easy to spend money in this business, like because you need a lot of support.
right.
So if you're going into just that SoCal market, for example, dependent upon the product category that you have, like you may need merchandisers, you may need field sales reps, plus brokers, etc. Plus you have to spend on marketing to build that area. Like that's a lot of cash, right? And then all of a sudden, Central Market wants you over here in Texas,
Right.
but like you're going to need you need all those same resources that you have on the ground in SoCal, you now need them in Texas, but do you actually have the money for that? You know? And oh, we'll make it work, but will you though? Is the question. So it's super important during this validation period to keep your velocities up. You have to keep your velocities, your sell through moving at like a really good pace. Yes, you should expand your distribution. You need to do it carefully, but really sell through is like such an important thing.
Mm,
You need to make sure that people are repurchasing and repurchasing. So if you go and open that Texas account, are your velocities going to suffer in your California market because now you're splitting your resources?
yeah.
That sure you've grown your top line revenue like in the short term, but like ultimately at the end of the day, you are risking um decreasing overall valuation because velocity is directly tied to your company valuation.
Yeah, there's so many moving pieces to this, and I think it's easy for a like creative founder to see the dangling carrots or see all the ideas or potential in front of them and want to go after all of it. But it's like that
Yeah.
analogy of the cart before the horse. We need to make sure that this market is solid. We have all the systems, everything is working, and then we move to expansion. So I could see that could happen very easily just because of the excitement if Central Market in Texas wants you, it's like, oh my gosh, this is so exciting. But you're right. It's like it goes back to the tortoise and the hare, like slow and steady usually
Yeah.
wins the race.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, exactly. Sometimes you have to say no to like the shiny new object, because it's actually going to be way better for you long term. And you're right, that's a hard thing for a creative founder to like stomach, um, but it can really save you in the long run. So
Mm.
I would say that's the biggest mistake I've seen with like early stage brands.
Yeah, that makes sense. You mentioned that it can be easy to spend money. So what are, for the person listening to this who for a lot of people, this might be a whole new world. What are some of the highest line items? Is it staff? Is it team? Is it inventory? Is it warehousing? Like, what are some of the biggest expenses that someone can um, be ready for?
Yeah. So some of the non-negotiable things that you have to spend on are inventory, obviously. So if you can get in with a co-manufacturer, that is gonna have low minimum order quantities,
Mm,
fantastic. Like, stick with those types of folks if you can find them. Um, so yeah, you definitely have to invest in your supply chain and your inventory. You are going to need some staff, but there's great ways to do that. I am like a huge fan of fractional staffing,
mm,
especially for brands that have a small amount of SKUs and are just getting going. Like, tap into, and this is really kind of like what my agency focuses on as well too, is tap into those like high level strategic people because they have playbooks because they've done this before, and they're going to be able to tap you in to like their framework and their playbook very quickly, efficiently, and easily. So you can afford to work with higher level people because they have a system. So you don't need them 40 hours a week, right? You don't need them like that like full salaried portion. You may need them 3 to 10 hours a week because they're super efficient. And then guess what? You're going to have like a high level strategic person helping you with your early stage brand. And in the long run, this is how you're going to avoid expensive mistakes
mm,
because it's super important at the beginning to surround yourself with people who have done this before because it's an inventory based business and there's so many different ways you can make mistakes.
right.
Um, I would say that people oftentimes overspend on marketing because think about, oh, we have so many options these days, right?
Mm,
Like there are so many options for strategy in marketing, so many different ways that, for the consumer to discover your product, so many different platforms, so many different like approaches to influencer and affiliate and PR. And like this is your whole world, right? Like you have a podcast about this. Like we could talk about this all day. I think that hone in on your strategy on how you want your customer journey to what you want that to look like. What platforms are you going to be on? Don't try and be on all of them, right?
mhm,
Like you just can't, you don't have the resources, you won't be able to create the content to actually see ROI on those platforms. So hone in, focus on like one or two, and just don't veer from that, right? I mean, unless something's not working, that's a different story. But like, don't feel like you have to be on TikTok because everybody else is on TikTok or because like, you know what I mean? Like maybe your customer is like totally on Instagram and like you need to take a super strong approach to influencer, or maybe you have like a strategic way to spend on advertising, or maybe you're really going to hone in on, I've seen a lot of people do this recently, on like press and in real life events to grow your following. So like map that out and really focus on what that's going to look like before you start hiring people and before you start spending versus, oh, I need a SEO person over here. I need a someone who's going to manage my influencer over here. I need someone who's going to manage my Instagram over here. I need someone who's going to run my ads. I mean, add that up, like very expensive on a monthly basis. And then you're like, oh my God, wait a second. None of these things are actually like working together,
mhm.
but somehow I've managed to rack up retainers, like this like huge retainer every month, you know? So just really think about how all these pieces work together and what the strategy is like before you sign on marketing agencies, I would say.
Think that's incredible advice, and I think it goes back to your philosophy that you shared the whole time, which is narrow and deep, and give something time, I believe, too. Like, that's the purpose of a campaign. You don't just do things for a day and see if it works. You really put the strategy towards it, you narrow in exactly what you want to do, and then you receive the feedback. And if you're not receiving the feedback, like no feedback is feedback as well, and then
Yeah,
you pivot the strategy after a certain amount of time. But I think this is incredible advice for anyone listening, especially in this time of endless options. Like you mentioned, there's a
so
digital
many
world,
options.
so much out
Yeah.
there.
I mean, even you and I were talking about SEO the other day, right? Like
Yeah.
SEO, like there's so many options for SEO, like so many different ways you can do it now. There's AI, there's agencies, there's independent contractors, there's like there's just a lot of options. Who do you work with, right? But like making sure that whatever your goal is, that it ties into the rest of your programs and the rest of your goals.
Yeah.
So
I love it. So, what do you have next coming for the agency? Tell us a little bit about what you're excited about, what people can expect, where to follow you, all those things.
oh, yes. Yes. So, yeah, our Instagram is It's All Happening Agency Co. I've got a lot of stuff going on the Instagram. We just released a free guide on how to sort of like the framework of how to build a CPG brand. So I have four pillars that I like to focus on when really honing in on building a go-to-market strategy for a brand. So I have a guide that I just released. You can get that over email if you sign up. And then I'm actually launching a podcast as well too, with women in CPG. I'm super excited for that. I'm going to have like lots of really interesting conversations around just the industry in general and like what it's like to be a woman in this industry. I'm sort of like fascinated with that whole topic as well too. So and then we're launching a newsletter, which is going to be super fun. And then I have this arm of the agency called the CPG School. So I've got It's All Happening and then the CPG School. The CPG School is a digital online course place, like a place for people in CPG for resources, essentially. So our agency can help you launch your brand or launch your brand for you, work very closely with you. Or if your, budget is more of an issue and you want to learn how to do it yourself, you want to bootstrap, the CPG School is a place for founders to learn how to launch it themselves. So in January, I'm going to be hosting a free mastermind class on how to launch your CPG brand. And then eventually in Q1, we'll be rolling out a full 8-week course on how to launch like all the nitty gritty details of what you'll need to know, like A to Z on how to get that brand to market. That's coming up like towards the end of Q1. So if you sign up for emails, like you'll get all this information, and then we also have it on the Instagram as well too.
So amazing. I feel like I just got a master class in the life and history of Danielle and CPG and products and go to market and all of that. So thank you. This was a really, really interesting conversation. I love the way that you think about just launch and being super strategic, not doing everything at once, but yeah, those 2 to 3 things and keeping it simple, keeping it direct, keeping it narrow and deep. And I know that everyone listening to the show today is really going to enjoy it. So thank you so much for being here.
Of course. Thank you for having me, Bridget. I love chatting with you. And yeah, this was super fun.
So fun. Thank you everyone to listening to another episode of Visibility Era, the podcast. We'll be back next week with more.